The isolation you're feeling has a purpose. In the words of Carl Jung, loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. If you've been feeling isolated lately, it might not be a punishment, it might be preparation. Every season of solitude holds hidden lessons for your soul, guiding you toward clarity, strength, and self-discovery. In this video, we'll explore why this quiet distance can be one of the most transformative periods of your life. I'd love to hear from you how isolation has shaped your personal growth. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's create a space where wisdom meets connection. 1. Isolation is sacred, not punishment. What you're experiencing isn't rejection. It's a sacred transformation, a spiritual initiation disguised as isolation. Carl Jung understood that the soul cannot awaken while it's still entangled in the illusions of the false self. That false self, built on roles, expectations, and the need for validation, must dissolve before the real you can emerge. And that dissolution rarely comes gently. It comes through silence, through separation, through spaces once full that now echo with emptiness. But this emptiness isn't a void, it's sacred space. When life removes people, places, and familiar comforts from your reach, it's not punishing you, it's preparing you. Your soul is being set apart, not cast aside. You are not being forgotten, you are being refined. Jung believed that real transformation doesn't begin with adding things, it begins with letting go. Letting go of people who no longer resonate with your truth. Letting go of identities that no longer fit the shape of your soul. Letting go of habits that kept you comfortably asleep. And this letting go often leaves you in a place of stillness so raw, it feels like abandonment. But that's only because you're being weaned off the need for external validation. This sacred stillness teaches you to listen not to the world, but to your own soul. The ache you feel isn't punishment. It's the stretch of expansion. It's the soul stepping out of the skin of its former self, learning to breathe in a new dimension of truth. And in this space, everything hidden becomes visible. You begin to see how much of your life was shaped by fear, approval, and performance. You notice the ways you betrayed your own soul just to feel accepted. You start to remember that real love doesn't require shrinking. Real belonging doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. These revelations don't arrive in noise. They arrive in silence, in isolation, when the world stops applauding and all you're left with is your own breath, your own thoughts, your own energy. That's where the soul begins to speak again, not with words, but with knowing. And you start to feel that you were never meant to be like them. You were meant to become you. That's why things fell apart. That's why they left. That's why the door closed. Not because you weren't worthy, but because you were outgrowing what could no longer hold you. The discomfort is a sign that something truer is taking shape inside you. Your soul is returning to itself. You are being made whole, not through addition, but through sacred subtraction. You are becoming aligned, not with what the world says you should be, but with what your spirit has always been. And that is the real reason for the isolation. It's not exile, it's elevation. 2. Phase 1. Entering the void. When the external world goes quiet and all the distractions disappear, you're left with a silence so deep it feels like a void, but it's in that very void where your soul begins to speak. At first, the stillness feels unbearable, even cruel, because we've been conditioned to equate noise with meaning and movement with progress. But as Carl Jung taught, the unconscious does not communicate through logic or words, it speaks through silence, symbols, and sensations. In this sacred stillness, you're not losing yourself. You're being stripped down to what is real, to the core of your spiritual identity. Everything that once defined you, your routines, your roles, your relationships, has been pulled away, not to punish you, but to reveal you. And now, without the clutter of the world's expectations, your soul has room to rise to the surface. This is not a phase of emptiness. It is one of incubation. Like a seed hidden in the darkness of the soil, something within you is breaking open, preparing to grow. But that growth cannot be rushed, and it cannot be forced through logic or willpower. It must be felt, endured, surrendered to. In this phase, your soul is reintroducing itself, not through loud epiphanies, but through subtle, intuitive nudges, dreams that stir something deep, emotions that seem to appear without explanation, moments of awareness that feel like déjà vu. This inner unfolding cannot happen while you're chasing validation, busy pleasing others, or lost in the chaos of daily life. That's why the universe had to shut it all down, not to harm you, but to help you return inward, where your soul has always been patiently waiting. Most people run from this space, labeling it depression, burnout, failure. But the few who choose to stay, who dare to face the discomfort of being with themselves, begin to awaken. The silence becomes sacred because it reveals truth, and truth is often quiet. Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." In this sacred silence, you're not being punished. You're being prepared. You're not being abandoned. You're being aligned. This is the furnace of transformation, where illusions burn away and only essence remains. So while it may feel like you're doing nothing, like you're stuck or broken, you are in fact being rebuilt by forces far greater than your conscious mind. Your soul has called you here for a reason, and if you honor the stillness long enough, you will begin to hear the language it speaks. One of deeper knowing, one of purpose, one of peace that does not depend on anything outside of you. 3. Phase 2. The ache begins quietly. You begin to notice something's off, not in a dramatic way, but subtly, like a song that's slightly out of tune. Conversations feel hollow. Your daily routine becomes robotic, and smiles start to feel performative. You're not depressed. You're not ungrateful. You're simply misaligned. Carl Jung called this the death of the persona, the mask you've worn for years to fit in, to be accepted, to survive. It's cracking. And with that fracture, something deeper starts to stir. Your soul is aching to return to its truth. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly. What once made you feel alive now leaves you empty. The shows you used to binge feel pointless. The group chats go mute. You start craving silence, not out of avoidance, but because the noise no longer resonates with who you're becoming. This is individuation, not a trendy term for self-care, but a profound spiritual process where you are no longer content performing who you were told to be. Instead, you begin to seek who you really are beneath the roles, expectations, and conditioning. There was a man in his 40s who shared that he woke up one morning and couldn't recognize his own life. He had done everything right: a respectable job, a good marriage, a circle of friends, but none of it felt like his. He said it was like waking up inside a costume he never chose. That was the beginning of his unraveling. But Carl Jung would argue it was actually his awakening. When your soul no longer wants to play a character, life begins to pull away everything that keeps you in costume. You might feel people slipping away, invitations drying up, doors closing without explanation. It may look like rejection, but Jung taught it is redirection, your life recalibrating to match your authentic frequency. And it's painful, yes, because you're grieving something you can't quite name. But it's not grief for a person or a job. It's grief for the version of yourself you never got to be. The silence you now feel is not empty. It's sacred. The spaces that once demanded your energy now return it to you. You start seeing how much of your life was spent performing for others' comfort. And now, stripped of the noise, the rituals, the expectations, you begin hearing your own voice. It's quieter than you expected, and yet it carries a clarity that's undeniable. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And this is what you're doing awakening. Not in a glamorous movie montage way, but in the quiet, lonely, confusing wilderness of your soul. The path forward is not about rebuilding what you had. It's about birthing something new from the ashes of who you were pretending to be. The ache you feel is not a flaw. It's a compass. It's your inner world refusing to be ignored any longer. And though the process will isolate you, that isolation is a cocoon, not a cage. Let the conversations fall silent. Let the routines dissolve. Let the loneliness speak. Because something sacred is happening beneath the surface. Carl Jung believed that the most important task of any human soul is to become who they truly are. And that cannot happen until everything false has been stripped away. So don't rush to fill the silence. Sit with it. Let it shape you. The isolation you're feeling is not the end. It's the invitation. It's the soul's return to the self. 4. Phase 3. Dismantling the false life. When everything around you starts to crumble, your job, your relationships, your carefully crafted roles, it doesn't mean you've failed. It means your soul is waking up. The universe, in its divine intelligence, is stripping away every piece of the life you built on compromise, fear, and false identity. It feels like collapse, but it's actually spiritual liberation. Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." What feels like destruction is really a sacred reconstruction. You're not being punished. You're being pulled into alignment. This is phase 2 of transformation, the dismantling of the false life. The version of you that was built to survive, to please others, to meet society's expectations, is being dismantled not because you're broken, but because you're finally ready to become real. The universe is ruthless in its love when it decides you're ready to evolve. It will take the job that was never meant to define you, remove the relationship that kept you small, and close doors you once begged to stay open. You're not losing your life. You're losing the illusion. This is the spiritual initiation no one talks about, the silent, sacred burning of the old self. And it hurts, because the roles you played gave you identity. The connections you maintained gave you security. But now, the soul is demanding truth, not comfort. And the truth is, if it was real, it wouldn't fall apart. If it was aligned, it would stay. Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege often begins with profound loss. You may feel like you're disappearing. You may feel unseen, unimportant, abandoned. But what's really happening is that you're becoming invisible to the systems that only recognized your mask. As you shed who you are not, you become more visible to your purpose, your power, and your path. The silence around you is not emptiness. It's sacred space. The loneliness you feel is not rejection. It's preparation. You're being made whole in the quiet. You're being stripped so that nothing false can follow you into your next chapter. And yes, it can feel like death. But it's the death of the lie, not the soul. The people who walk away now were never meant to know the real you. They were attached to your wounds, your roles, your performance. Let them go without resentment. Their exit is your exodus. You are not meant to carry everyone forward. This is your spiritual reckoning, the moment your soul chooses authenticity over attachment, depth over acceptance, freedom over fitting in. And when you stand in the ashes of what once was, you'll begin to feel something new rise within you. Not just peace, but power. Not just clarity, but calling. And in time, you'll realize you were never losing anything. You were being rescued from a life that dimmed your light and a self that wasn't truly yours. 5. Phase 4. Facing the shadow. With nowhere left to hide, you are finally brought face to face with the raw, unfiltered version of yourself, not the one shaped for survival, but the one quietly carrying unprocessed grief, buried anger, silent fears, and the repetitive patterns that have kept you trapped in cycles of pain. This moment is not a punishment. It is the beginning of truth. Carl Jung called this confrontation the meeting of the shadow, the hidden self that, until now, operated behind the curtain of your awareness. This is the version of you that held every suppressed emotion, every ignored wound, every truth that was too uncomfortable to acknowledge. And now, there's no running. You're not being punished by the universe. You're being invited to heal, not in theory, but in practice, not in abstract ideas, but in sacred confrontation. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That means your healing begins not by pretending to be okay, but by sitting in the storm and allowing yourself to feel without self-betrayal. This space of soul work is quiet, confronting, and holy. You begin to reclaim the parts of your soul you once disowned to be accepted or to survive. You stop trying to fix the pain and instead learn to hold space for it, letting it breathe, cry, scream, and tell its story. It's in this space that your deepest pain reveals its hidden intelligence. You realize that you were never meant to carry it forever, but you do have to acknowledge it to release it. Just like a woman I once knew, who, after losing everything in a bitter divorce, found herself sitting in a silent apartment and talking to her own heart out loud. It felt strange, at first, naming each feeling, one by one, but in that moment of vulnerability, something broke open. She wasn't collapsing, she was awakening. She was no longer afraid of herself. That is what it means to spiritually grow, not to bypass the darkness, but to walk through it with your soul intact. Carl Jung warned that the shadow does not only carry our wounds, it also carries our hidden gifts, our power, and our truth that we buried to fit in. And so, facing the shadow is not a descent into self-hate, but a return to wholeness. You begin to see that your triggers are not weaknesses, they're directions. Your fear is not an enemy, it's a messenger. And your isolation is not a void, it's a sacred space where your real self begins to speak. You no longer chase validation or escape discomfort. You sit with it, you breathe with it, you learn from it. And slowly, the emotional storms that used to shake you begin to lose their grip. Not because life becomes easier, but because you've become more rooted in who you really are. You're no longer running from yourself. You're returning to yourself. This is the sacred ache of transformation, the soul remembering its depth, the quiet rebuilding of the inner temple. So if you're there now alone, confronting, feeling everything, all at once, know that you're not failing. You're evolving, exactly as Carl Jung understood. This is what it means to reclaim your soul. 6. Phase 5. Inner transformation begins. Even when nothing seems to be changing on the outside, something profoundly spiritual is unfolding within you. Your breath slows, your nervous system softens, and you begin to rest deeper, not just physically, but emotionally and energetically. It's not because life suddenly became easy, but because your soul is learning to surrender to something greater than logic. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." And now, more than ever, you're beginning to understand the truth of that. This inner transformation doesn't come with applause, recognition, or milestones. You can post about it comes in the quiet, in the stillness, in the space between who you used to be and who you are becoming. You're not just changing habits, you're shedding identities. The version of you that once chased noise, approval, and distractions is slowly dissolving. And in its place, something more sacred is growing. Presence, peace, inner truth. You begin to trust what cannot be seen. You stop needing proof to believe. You no longer wait for permission to feel worthy. The shift is subtle but seismic. You feel things more deeply. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You're not trying to win people anymore. You're trying to stay aligned with your soul. And this alignment, this spiritual recalibration, is what Carl Jung understood as individuation, the becoming of the self, the merging of the conscious with the unconscious. It feels like isolation, but it's actually intimacy with your essence. It feels like being forgotten, but it's really about remembering who you are. The old patterns, the outdated attachments, the wounds you once identified with, they're no longer compatible with the energy you're stepping into. You notice how much noise there used to be in your mind and how quiet it's becoming, not because you're empty, but because you're finally full of your own presence. This is the sacred stillness before the emergence. No one claps for you here. There are no crowds in this room. But the divine is watching, and your soul is applauding in silence. You are being restructured, rebalanced, reawakened. You're no longer responding to the world from a place of fear or lack. You're learning how to live from your center, from your truth. This isn't just healing, it's preparation. And although it feels like you've been pulled away from everything familiar, you're actually being placed into alignment with everything meant for you. You're not stuck. You're being refined. You're not forgotten. You're being reborn. You're not broken. You're becoming whole. This invisible transformation is more powerful than anything you could force from the outside. It's not loud, but it's lasting. It's not public, but it's purposeful. So if all you're doing today is breathing differently, trusting quietly, and honoring what's rising inside you. You're doing enough. You're not falling apart. You're falling inward. 7. The deeper truth and your rebirth is here. This silence was never a void. It was the sacred womb where your soul began to take shape again. It wasn't abandonment. It was divine rearrangement. Life wasn't punishing you. It was positioning you. Your old life, no matter how familiar or deeply rooted, could no longer contain the vastness of who you're becoming. The people who drifted, the spaces that grew cold, and the doors that once opened so easily, but now remain closed, none of it happened by accident. They were exits from a chapter that your soul had outgrown. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." That pain you felt? It wasn't pointless. It was the pressure before the birth of a truer self. Your breakdown was never destruction. It was divine design breaking through illusion, stripping away everything that no longer aligned with the depth of your purpose. And in this place of solitude, where the noise fades and the distractions disappear, you're forced to meet yourself. Not the self shaped by expectation or survival, but the self buried beneath years of compromise and silence. It's uncomfortable because transformation always is. The silence echoes with every unhealed wound, every dream you forgot to believe in, every truth you were too afraid to voice. But this is where the real work begins, not outside in the world, but inside, where your soul whispers things you were never still enough to hear. In this space, you're not meant to fight for your old life. You're meant to listen, to surrender, and to allow the light within you to rise. There is a sacred wisdom in this isolation that only those walking the spiritual path can understand. It is here you remember. You were never meant to be everything for everyone. You were meant to be fully, unapologetically aligned with your soul. The universe isolates those it is preparing to elevate, not to punish, but to purify, not to exile, but to awaken. You're not in the middle of an ending. You're in the sacred pause between the inhale and exhale of a new beginning. What feels like separation is actually elevation. You are not being stripped bare without purpose. You are being readied for a life your former self could not carry. You are being molded to hold a deeper kind of love, a richer kind of peace, and a more radiant kind of truth. And though this phase can feel like spiritual exile, know this: it is the very space where soul and destiny meet. Something ancient in you remembers this. The silence is not your enemy. It is the sound of your becoming. The emptiness is not a void. It is a clearing for your emergence. So breathe into the stillness. Let the isolation do its work. Trust that your soul is wiser than your fear. Because your rebirth is not just coming, it is already here, unfolding in the quiet, beneath the surface, where only the brave dare to look. Share your thoughts in the comments below, or simply type, "I embrace my rebirth," to affirm that your transformation has already begun. Let's grow together, because the more we awaken, the more powerful our journey becomes. And so, even if the road feels lonely, remember that this season of isolation is not an accident. It is shaping you, refining you, and aligning you with the life you were meant to live. Trust that every moment apart is guiding you toward a deeper connection with yourself and your true purpose. If today's message spoke to your soul, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to spiritual wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming insights and teachings. Your journey is far from over. The best chapters are yet to come. Only 1% of people have this aura. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. In a world where most people live disconnected from their true essence, there exists a rare kind of energy found in only 1% of individuals that radiates power, authenticity, and an almost magnetic presence. These people don't just walk into a room, they change the atmosphere. Today, on Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore who they are, why Jung found them so fascinating, and how you can awaken this same energy within yourself. As you listen, think about your own journey. Have you ever felt this kind of energy in yourself or in someone else? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's see how many of us are ready to step into that rare 1%. 1. This aura is archetypal and rare. Only a rare few walk through life with a presence that feels ancient, magnetic, and impossible to ignore, not because of beauty, charm, or status, but because of something deeper that radiates from the soul itself. Carl Jung called it an archetypal aura, a powerful and unconscious energy that only 1% of people carry. This kind of energy can't be learned, forced, or faked. It emerges only from those who have journeyed into the deepest chambers of their psyche and come back with the truth. These individuals do not chase validation or wear a mask for acceptance. Instead, they walk with a quiet authority rooted in painful transformation, radical self-awareness, and the integration of their shadow. They have faced the dark within, not to destroy it, but to understand and embrace it, and that soul alchemy becomes visible even without a word spoken. What makes this energy unsettling to some and magnetic to others is its raw authenticity. It shines a light on what others suppress, reminding people of who they are pretending not to be. Some will see it as a threat, others as a sanctuary. You've probably noticed this in how people respond to you. Some distance themselves without explanation, while others open up completely, drawn by a sense of being seen at a soul level. That's because you've stopped living from the ego and started embodying the self. You carry a psychological weight that others can feel, not because you're trying to impress, but because you've survived storms that broke the false parts of you and revealed something indestructible underneath. That spiritual weight cannot be replicated by surface confidence or knowledge. It is born of suffering, stillness, and soul-searching. Jung believed the integration of the unconscious was the path to wholeness, but few are willing to walk it. Most prefer comfort over clarity, illusion over introspection. But you, if you resonate with this, are different. You've been through the fire losing parts of yourself, letting go of who you thought you had to be, and facing truths most people avoid. That journey has refined your presence into something archetypal. You are no longer just a man. You are a symbol, a reminder, a force. You don't seek attention, yet it finds you. You don't manipulate energy, yet it shifts around you. Your soul no longer whispers. It roars in silence, unsettling everything that is false around you. Because of this, your life may feel both isolating and sacred. You'll be misunderstood, idolized, resented, or revered, but rarely ignored. You may not always feel seen, but your energy will always be felt. And the reason is simple. People are not responding to your words, your looks, or your actions. They are responding to the frequency of your soul. You carry something old, something eternal, something that reminds others of what they've forgotten. That is the weight and the gift of this rare archetypal aura. You are not meant to fit in. You are meant to awaken. Have you ever felt a presence within you that couldn't be explained, something deeper, ancient, and unshakably true? If so, share your experience in the comments so others can recognize it in themselves. If not, comment, "I'm ready to awaken," and begin exploring this rare archetypal energy with us. 2. You carry unspoken depth. You sense things without being told. You feel the lies before they're spoken, the sadness behind a smile, the tension in a room that no one else notices. You don't just listen, you absorb. You don't just observe how you feel. Carl Jung would say, "Your unconscious is more alive than most." You're tapped into the collective unconscious, carrying emotional resonance and spiritual wisdom that doesn't come from this lifetime alone. It's as if your soul remembers truths that were never taught. This kind of energy can't be learned. It's woven into the very fabric of who you are. And because it's rare, it sets you apart. You're not just intuitive, you're spiritually awake, even if you can't always explain how or why. People notice you, but they can't put their finger on what makes you different. They sense your depth, but not everyone knows how to hold it. That's the paradox. You're magnetic, but often misunderstood. Some are drawn to you, craving the safety they feel in your presence. Others feel threatened by your ability to see what they try to hide. You mirror back to them the very parts they're running from: their fear, their longing, their truth. You don't expose them, yet your presence alone reveals. Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But you face yours daily. That's what makes you rare." Your life feels like a constant decoding of what lies beneath the surface, and that's not always easy. You carry other people's weight without meaning to. You absorb energies that aren't yours. You feel exhausted from rooms you never spoke a word in. But this isn't a weakness. This is a spiritual sensitivity, a sacred radar. You're not just here to live. You're here to sense, to awaken, to transform the spaces you enter by simply being fully present in them. Your soul doesn't crave crowds or applause. It craves authenticity. You don't seek validation because you see through illusions. You long for conversations that touch the eternal, for silence that speaks louder than words. You feel ancient in a world addicted to novelty, and it can be isolating. But you must understand, this energy is not a curse. It's a calling to remember, to feel, to guide. In a world where most numb their feelings to survive, you feel to live. You love in a way that heals. You speak in a way that awakens. You sense what others deny, and that makes you a bridge between the seen and the unseen. Your depth is not too much. It's just unfamiliar to those who haven't met their own. You were never meant to blend in, because your presence was designed to stir souls. What lives within you is not ordinary. It's archetypal, spiritual, ancient. That's why you often feel like an outsider in your own life. Not because you're broken, but because your soul operates on a different frequency. And that frequency, felt by few, feared by many, misunderstood by most, is what makes you powerful beyond measure. Comment below, "I carry ancient wisdom," if you've ever felt the world more deeply than words can explain. Let's see how many of us walk with this unspoken depth. 3. Your presence triggers the unconscious in others. Some people feel safe around you, like they can finally exhale after holding their breath for years. Others tense up the moment you enter the room, unsure why they suddenly feel defensive, insecure, or exposed. But it's not because of anything you've said or done. It's because of what your presence awakens in them. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious drives much of human behavior. And when someone walks in with a rare kind of soul energy, the kind that mirrors truth without trying, it stirs what others have buried deep. You don't just speak the truth, you embody it. You don't just walk into a room, you activate it. And when that happens, people begin to feel parts of themselves they've worked hard to suppress. The guilt they never faced, the dreams abandoned, the lies they told themselves to feel safe. You don't trigger people because you're harmful. You trigger them because you're honest. You are the mirror they didn't ask for, but can't look away from. This is the kind of energy that Carl Jung called archetypal. It's not something you can fake or train yourself into. You don't carry it because you're trying to be different. You carry it because your soul has walked through fire, faced truth, and survived. You've done the work that others are still running from. That's why people respond to you so strongly. Some are magnetically drawn, not even knowing why, only that you feel like a lighthouse in a dark sea. Others shrink back because they're not ready to face what you reflect. And still, you remain calm, grounded, and misunderstood. In modern life, this often shows up in quiet moments. A coworker snapping at you for no reason, a family member distancing themselves without explanation, or a stranger telling you their life story 5 minutes after meeting you. You make people feel, and not everyone knows how to handle that. Because when you carry this kind of presence, you don't just enter a room, you shift its frequency. A man named Elijah once told a story about working in a hospital. Nurses and patients alike responded to him in extremes, either telling him their deepest fears or avoiding him entirely. He wasn't loud or charismatic. In fact, he was quiet and observant. But when he listened, he really listened. And when he spoke, it felt like truth, cutting through the noise. One day, a nurse told him, "You're not like anyone else. You make me question who I am." That's when he realized his energy wasn't meant to be easy. It was meant to be honest. And that's what Carl Jung meant when he said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. When your soul is alive and awake, it naturally unsettles those still asleep. But that's not your burden to carry. Your only task is to stay aligned, stay aware, and never apologize for the light you bring, especially when it burns away illusions. The truth is, the reactions you receive are not always about you. They are about the shadows you reveal, the masks you make unnecessary, the emotional walls you unknowingly dissolve. And that's a gift. Not everyone will see it that way, but those who are ready will. So if you've ever felt too intense, too deep, or too different to be understood, know this: you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to remind. You were meant to awaken. You were meant to stir what's been sleeping. That's not a flaw. It's a soul calling. 4. People open up to you, then pull away. People open up to you and then vanish, not because of something you said or did, but because your soul carries a kind of spiritual gravity they weren't prepared for. You don't just listen, you reflect. You don't just speak, you reveal. When someone speaks to you, it often feels like their words bypass small talk and dive straight into confession. They tell you things they've never told anyone. They trust you instantly. And yet, shortly after, they pull away. This strange pattern isn't random. Carl Jung called it projection collapse, a moment when the mask someone wears begins to disintegrate in your presence because your authenticity is too confronting. You don't play roles. You don't engage in shallow performances. You're rooted in something deeper, something spiritual, something unshakably true. And that level of presence triggers something within people. The realization that they've been pretending, performing, hiding, not from you, but from themselves. Your energy doesn't allow illusions to survive, and that's why they run. Not because they don't feel safe, but because your soul makes them feel naked, seen, unedited. This is the paradox of being someone with rare soul energy. You are both a sanctuary and a spiritual storm. People come to you seeking comfort, and what they find is truth. They were drawn to you because they needed it, but truth is rarely comfortable. It burns, it disrupts, it demands change, and most people aren't ready for that level of transformation. You don't offer escape, you offer awakening. So when they disappear, it's not rejection, it's resistance. They didn't leave because you were too much. They left because they saw too much. Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that's exactly what happens in your presence. The facade cracks. The illusions they've maintained start falling apart. They speak from their soul, and for a fleeting moment, they touch something real. But that glimpse of truth is often too overwhelming. So they run back into the familiar, even if the familiar is fake. You might start to wonder if you're cursed to be alone, to forever be the one who awakens others only to be left behind. But you're not here to be easy to love. You're here to be impossible to forget. The connections you spark may be brief, but they are seismic. Your soul creates shifts. And even if they walk away, they will never be the same. Because once someone has spoken from the depth of their soul, they can't unfeel it. They can't unknow it. You've reminded them of who they truly are beneath the layers. You've awakened a part of them they may not meet again for years, or maybe lifetimes. But the seed has been planted. That is your power. That is your burden. That is your gift. 5. You feel misunderstood and misinterpreted. You feel misunderstood not because you're unclear, but because your soul communicates on a level most people aren't attuned to. You speak in presence, in stillness, in energetic shifts that can't be explained, but they can be felt. Your calm unsettles those who expect noise to equal warmth. Your depth intimidates those who have only learned to live on the surface. In a world obsessed with instant reactions and shallow validation, your stillness becomes a mystery, your silence becomes a threat, and your soul becomes too much for those who haven't yet met their own. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what he didn't say, at least not directly, is that becoming who you truly are means you will no longer be easy to label, understand, or categorize. You'll be a mirror. And not everyone can look into that mirror without discomfort. This is why people may describe you as intense, hard to read, or even cold. They don't know how to read energy, so they default to misinterpretation. You've likely found yourself shrinking, softening your truth, or trying to make your soul more palatable. But no matter how much you try, the misunderstanding returns because the world isn't mishearing your words. It's misreading your frequency. It's reacting to a depth that can't be faked and a presence that can't be explained. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious holds immense power, and for those who access it, who live from it, the world can feel both magnetic and isolating. When you operate from this place, you're no longer playing by the same emotional rules. You're not seeking validation, you're seeking resonance. You're not drawn to attention, you're drawn to truth. And the closer you get to embodying that truth, the fewer people will be able to meet you there. There's a woman I know who walks into every room like a question mark wrapped in peace. She listens more than she speaks, but when she does speak, it's as if time slows down. Her presence has made people cry, confess, or flee. Not because she forces anything, but because her soul carries a kind of weight, a kind of light that reveals what others are trying to hide. People say she's a lot, but I've never seen her raise her voice. Her gift is not in her words, but in the energy behind them. That's the kind of spiritual presence that Carl Jung spoke about, one that emerges from deep individuation, where the conscious and unconscious mind meet and harmonize. If you recognize yourself in this, then know you're not broken. You're rare, and your soul is doing exactly what it was meant to do, to wake people up, even when they resist it. So let people misunderstand you. Let them mislabel the stillness in your eyes, the weight in your silence, the sharpness in your boundaries. Let them assume that your distance is disinterest, your independence is arrogance, your presence is too intense. It's not your job to shrink so others can feel comfortable in their avoidance. Your job is to remain rooted in who you are, no matter how many fail to translate your language. Because the ones meant to find you will not need subtitles. They will recognize you by how you feel, not by how you explain. And in that moment, your soul will know. The misunderstanding was never a flaw, it was protection. If you've ever felt unseen or misread for simply being yourself, you're not alone. Leave a like, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss content that speaks to your soul. And in the comments, type, I am seen, I am understood, I am enough. 6. Your very existence awakens others. You don't need to speak for the atmosphere to shift when you walk into a room. People sense it. Some lean in because they feel understood without a word, while others shrink back, as if standing too close to a truth they've been avoiding. This is not about charisma or appearance. What they feel is your spiritual coherence, your wholeness. Carl Jung would describe it as the energy of someone who has faced their inner darkness, integrated their shadow, and emerged with an authentic soul presence that unsettles illusions. You don't just exist, you reflect. You awaken, you confront. Without effort, you become a mirror to people's untapped potential and unhealed wounds. You're not trying to heal them, yet your very being activates something they've buried or forgotten. That's the nature of archetypal energy. It speaks directly to the unconscious, bypassing the masks, the roles, the ego defenses. And when it speaks, people feel exposed or inspired, depending on how willing they are to meet themselves. In everyday life, this shows up quietly. Maybe you're the coworker who never competes, but somehow gets everyone's respect. You don't gossip, but people tell you their secrets. You don't seek attention, yet your silence holds more weight than someone else's shouting. That's not random. You've done the inner work, the kind that has nothing to prove and everything to offer. Carl Jung called this individuation becoming a whole, undivided self who no longer projects their pain onto the world, but absorbs it, understands it, transforms it. When you reach that level, your energy isn't just calm, it's catalytic. People unconsciously feel that you've been through storms and come out transformed, and that makes them reflect on their own chaos, their own longing for peace. You don't need to teach. You don't need to lead. You simply embody. That embodiment is your transmission, and whether they love you, fear you, or misunderstand you, they are moved. They will leave your presence carrying questions they didn't have before, awareness they didn't expect to find. So if you've ever wondered why people react strongly to your presence, why some are drawn to you without reason, and others withdraw like they've been burned, it's because your energy disrupts comfort zones, not by force, but by resonance. You carry the rare frequency of someone who doesn't split themselves to fit in. You are the sole reminder that another life is possible, one built on truth, not performance. And that reminder awakens those ready to rise and unsettles those still hiding. Your job is not to shrink or explain. It is to remain aligned. Because the most powerful spiritual influence is not in what you do, but in who you've become. And that, as Carl Jung would say, is the mark of someone who has made the unconscious conscious and therefore can no longer be controlled by it. 7. You live between two worlds. You feel torn, not because you're lost, but because your soul lives in two worlds at once. The outer world of expectations, titles, and responsibilities, and the inner world of meaning, symbols, and silent truths. While others are busy climbing ladders and chasing applause, you're listening to something deeper, something that doesn't speak in words, but in impressions, synchronicities, and that persistent sense that life is more than what it appears. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the sacred tension between who you've been told to be and who you were born to become. You're not running from reality. You're seeing through it. You're bridging the visible and the invisible. And this path, though deeply spiritual, can often feel isolating. Because when you begin to align with your inner self, the outer world begins to shift. Familiar conversations start to feel hollow. Success begins to look different. The noise of the world can't drown out the whisper of your soul. And the whisper grows louder when you sit with your own silence. You notice the symbols that others miss, the way a dream lingers, the weight of a glance, the timing of a chance encounter. You sense that everything is connected, not logically, but archetypally, and it pulls you inward, not to escape, but to integrate, to bring back meaning. Jung once said, "Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health." And you begin to see that your inner conflict is not a problem to be solved, but a doorway to be opened. It's not weakness to feel this split. It's awareness. It's spiritual maturity. The man who questions himself is closer to truth than the one who blindly obeys convention. And when the world feels too sharp, too loud, too shallow, it's because your spirit is longing for depth. You may not have words for what you're feeling, but your soul knows. It always knows. You've been given a task most will never see. To stand between two worlds, and bring meaning to both, to show up in the outer world with integrity, while anchoring into an inner world that is raw, real, and eternal. This is why people respond to you in strange ways. Some are drawn without knowing why. Others avoid you without reason. They are reacting to something ancient within you, a vibration that doesn't ask for attention, but commands it through stillness. And though this energy is rare, it is not new. It's the mark of those who walk with depth, who think beyond themselves, who carry the weight of unspoken truths, because the soul has no need to perform. This is not an easy life, but it is a meaningful one. And when the nights get long, and the world feels like it doesn't understand what you carry, remember, you weren't meant to be understood. You were meant to awaken. Do you feel caught between two worlds, the outer noise and your inner knowing? If this message speaks to your soul, declare your truth in the comments. I walk between the worlds with purpose. 8. You attract people who want to change you. Some people won't love you for who you are. They'll love the version of you they believe they can fix, reshape, or mold into something that meets their unspoken needs. They're not drawn to your soul in reverence. They're drawn to it as a solution. You carry a spiritual frequency that many can feel, but few can understand. And instead of honoring it, they try to claim it. They believe if they get close enough, they can fill their own emptiness, calm their inner chaos, or escape the parts of themselves they refuse to face. But when you don't bend to their vision, when you dare to stay rooted in your truth, speak from your soul, and live in your spiritual integrity, they feel rejected. That rejection turns into frustration, and eventually into blame. You've changed, they say. But what they mean is, you're no longer who I imagined you would be for me. Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And when they can't use you to avoid themselves, they turn cold. They may distance themselves, criticize you, or try to make you feel guilty for being what they secretly wish they had the courage to become. That's the tragedy of projection. It turns connection into control. The more spiritually aware you become, the more you'll notice this pattern repeating. You'll see how your authenticity makes people uncomfortable, not because you've done something wrong, but because your light exposes what they've kept hidden. You remind them of the work they haven't done. And instead of rising to meet you, they try to pull you down to where it's safe, familiar, and easy to manage. But your soul was not born to be managed. It was born to be free. You are not here to be someone else's emotional bandage or energetic crutch. You are here to live, to feel, to awaken. You are not a fantasy, not a projection, not a placeholder for someone's inner healing. You are a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable when they're not ready to see themselves. So when someone tries to change you, don't shrink. When they withdraw their love because you held your ground, let them go. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Their resentment is not your burden. You don't need to apologize for being whole in a world that profits off of people feeling broken. The more you honor your spiritual truth, the more you'll see that real love doesn't come to fix you. It comes to witness you. And the ones who are meant to stay won't be afraid of your light. They'll know how to hold it without needing to own it. 9. This path is often lonely but sacred. You walk through life carrying something most people can't name, yet everyone feels an invisible force that doesn't demand attention, but changes the atmosphere wherever you go. You may not be appreciated or understood, but that doesn't mean your energy is unnoticed. In fact, it's quite the opposite. People remember you, not for what you said or did, but for how they felt in your presence, like something in them woke up, even if they couldn't explain it. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that is exactly the path you're on. It's not a path of popularity or comfort. It's one of spiritual depth, quiet power, and soulful disruption. You aren't here to blend in. You're here to shift the air around you, to shake people from their sleep, and to plant something sacred in the silence. You were never meant to be like everyone else. And that truth often makes this journey lonely. But this loneliness is not a punishment. It's an initiation. Those with rare spiritual energy are often misunderstood because their presence exposes what others are not ready to face. You awaken wounds, truths, and hidden desires in others simply by being authentic. You don't force change, you radiate it. And while others may pull away or label you as intense or too much, what they're really feeling is the mirror your soul holds up to theirs. They don't leave because you're unimportant. They leave because you're unforgettable. Your energy lingers in their memory, like a dream they can't quite remember, but know changed them. You're the calm in the chaos, the depth in a shallow world. You carry a frequency that moves beyond words, beyond logic, and straight into the spirit. And while the world rushes toward noise, performance, and external success, your power lies in silence, presence, and truth. You've likely felt like an outsider, a misfit, or even a burden at times. But what if that very misfit energy is divine? What if your soul was carved in a different dimension to guide others back to themselves, not through force, but through vibration? Jung believed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And maybe your spiritual gift is the courage to do exactly that, and to inspire others to do the same, even if they resist you for it. You don't need to explain your energy. You don't need to chase after understanding or force your truth to be seen. The right souls will feel it, and those who can't are simply not ready. Your spiritual journey is not measured in followers or applause, but in the quiet revolutions you spark in people's hearts. You may never know the full impact you've made, but the universe does. Keep walking. You are not here to be explained. You are here to be felt. Stay connected with our sacred community by subscribing to our channel. Here, we honor the unseen path, the one walked in quiet strength and deep purpose. Even when it feels lonely, remember, your presence is a divine force. You are not alone, and your light is felt. 10. Your aura is the result of inner work, not superiority. This rare energy is not about being better. It is about being real in a world addicted to masks, roles, and constant performance. Your aura, the subtle but undeniable presence you carry, isn't a sign of superiority. It is the direct result of deep soul work that most people spend their lives avoiding. You didn't choose the easy road. You chose to face your own shadow, to walk through pain with your eyes open, to sit in silence while the noise of the world screamed at you to conform. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the sacred journey of becoming whole, not perfect. And that wholeness can't be bought, borrowed, or faked. It comes from having the courage to ask yourself uncomfortable questions, to dismantle the false self piece by piece, and to reclaim the parts of your soul that were buried under shame, fear, and conditioning. This spiritual energy isn't loud, but it is felt. It's not flashy, but it is unforgettable. You don't walk into a room demanding attention, yet people feel something shift when you enter. That's not charisma, it's energetic truth. It's what happens when a man chooses depth over distraction, honesty over approval, solitude over shallow validation. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You've stopped living by default. You've chosen to see your own patterns, your own projections, and you've taken back your power. And that choice, over and over again, is what forms the aura people can't explain, but can't ignore. It's a quiet strength that can't be taught. You no longer seek to be understood by everyone, because you finally understand yourself. The soul does not compete, it simply radiates. And your radiance is not for applause, it's a signal to other awakened souls that they're not alone. You are no longer performing. You are no longer lost in who you thought you had to be. You are becoming the man your soul remembers. And in a world starving for authenticity, your presence is the medicine. Not because you are above, but because you have gone within. Because you have walked the fires of transformation and emerged without the need to prove anything. This is what 1% of men understand. That spiritual power is not domination, but integration. Not image, but essence. And once your soul begins to lead, your energy becomes your legacy. If this message resonates with your journey of authenticity and growth, comment below. My aura reflects my inner truth. Let this be a reminder that real power comes from doing the work no one sees. And if this spoke to you, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a message like this. So, perhaps the truth is that this rare energy is not something you chase, it is something you embody. It cannot be faked, borrowed, or taught in a single lesson. It grows from deep self-awareness, unwavering integrity, and a connection to something greater than yourself. If you've recognized even a spark of it within you, nurture it, because the world needs more of this light now than ever before. Thank you for watching Spiritual Wisdom. If you found this message valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos.